I was at Native Instruments. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was like, "What have you been doing, Steve?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm teaching Ableton online."
So you've seen really the full evolution of, I mean, if you were starting your career back in the 2000 range, I mean, the internet was just coming, just being invented, I guess, at that
And
point.
technologies have changed so much. In this era of information overload, there's loads of information about everything available on YouTube and on the internet. Music changes, and the music business changes, and the music industry changes. So if you want to have a successful career for any length of time, you need to be able to evolve with it and change and find what your role is going to be in this new situation.
Welcome to the podcast today. My name is Jason Tonioli, and I am with John von Seggern, a very seasoned music guy that has done all kinds of things, from writing music and working on projects like Wally with Disney and doing music school education type of stuff. And you're a jazz musician as well, play bass, John. But you've been doing this for a career for a long time, which is awesome. I'm so excited to have you on here. But I'm intrigued by what you're moving into with kind of a music school, but not in the way that a normal person would think of a music school. So welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to talk today, Jason.
Well, John, before we dive into kind of the education stuff, I like to kind of just have our guests kind of share a little bit about how they ended up in music. I think the career trajectory that most musicians have it's always an interesting story. It's never what you expected when you start out in this world. And so I
That's
think
for sure.
for people young or just anybody in the music industry, I think it's great to hear, what's that career path, and how did you end up to where you are today? So maybe start back at the beginning.
Sure. Well, at the beginning, when I was a young person in high school, I was looking at all the things I could do, and I just liked playing music more than anything else, pure and simple. And I played bass in bands when I was in high school, and then I got into jazz. When I went to college, I mostly studied jazz and classical music. And then I went to New York City and went to the New School Jazz program for a year. And then I ended up moving to Asia to start my career. So I started my professional career in Tokyo as a jazz player. I played jazz in Tokyo and I became pretty successful, but I think it's pretty well known that even successful jazz musicians are still scraping by. So, um, I branched out into playing other kinds of music, and I got hired to move to Hong Kong and play with some big pop stars there. And so for about 6 years, I was a studio and touring bass guitarist in the Hong Kong pop music industry. I played all over the world with Hong Kong pop stars. I've played in Madison Square Garden and Wembley Arena and gigantic football stadiums in China and all kinds of places like this. Um, After doing that for a while, I easily become bored and I want to move on to do new things. That's kind of been the mainstay of my career. So I moved into electronic music.
Five.
So yeah, so I attended the New School Jazz program in New York for a year. I got to study with some really heavy jazz musicians like Reggie Workman and Gary Peacock, familiar with those individuals. And then I had to start my professional career. I looked around New York City and I thought it's going to be really, really hard to start my professional career competing with people here. So I ended up moving to Japan and I launched my jazz career there. I ended up playing at clubs all over Japan and touring some. And then I branched out into playing other kinds of music. And I ended up getting hired by a Hong Kong pop star named Jackie Chung, who is one of the biggest pop stars of all time globally, actually, if you look him up. And so playing with him and some other Hong Kong stars, I toured all over the world and played in a lot of major music venues, including Wembley Arena and Madison Square Garden and giant football stadiums in China. And after about 6 years of doing that, I started DJing and producing electronic music. That was the next unfolding of my career. I was one of the first computer DJs, actually. One
Huh.
of the as far as I know, we were the first in Asia. As far as I know, me and my partner, we were on the cover of magazines back then. As like, it was so shocking to see people use computers instead of records back then. That was about in 2000.
Interesting.
So then I did that for a few years, and at some point, I decided to move back to the States because I didn't really see the situation in Hong Kong moving in a positive direction in the future there. I decided to move back to California. I went to grad school and I got a master's degree in ethnomusicology, which was something I'd always wanted to study. And I specialized in the impact of the internet on the evolution of music. That
Hmm.
was my thesis topic. I've now seen a lot of the things I wrote about come true over the years. Um, then when I left grad school, I decided not to go into academia for various reasons. And I then began working in music technology. I got a job at Native Instruments, the software company.
Mhm.
And I also started doing consulting with film composers here. They were using complex software rigs and usually using Native Instruments software. So I kind of got a reputation for working with people around town and helping them. And then that's how then I got to know some of the sound designers in town that were working on really big projects. And that's how I ended up working on Wally. I knew a couple of the guys that work with Thomas Newman regularly. And so they invited me for that gig. Unfortunately, Thomas Newman already had two sound designers that had been working with him for decades, so they didn't really need a third person to join the Thomas Newman band, unfortunately. But I worked on some other smaller film projects and whatnot back then. And then I ended up working in online music education. I remember I was at Native Instruments. I was talking to a friend of mine, and I was like, "What have you been doing, Steve?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm teaching Ableton online." And that was the first time I really heard about teaching music online.
Hmm.
And I thought, I love that. I love being at home and working online. So I started working for a school in New York called Dubspot, which was quite famous back then, and I ended up running their online music production program. And since then, that was about in 2010. And since then, I've worked for a few different schools mostly in electronic music production specifically. And I've directed and designed these programs where we're putting together courses for aspiring music producers, basically. For the last uh well, from 2017 to 2025, I was working for Icon Collective here in LA, which was very famous in our niche for electronic music producers. It was a school in Burbank. And again, I was the director of the online program there. And now I am running my own school, Future Proof Music School, which is trying to we're building a system using AI to help people learn quicker and faster and more efficiently.
So you've seen really the full evolution of, I mean, if you were starting your career back in the 2000 range, I mean, the internet was just coming, just being invented, I guess, at that point.
Indeed.
And then it evolved into, by 2010, it's really starting to take off. You've got YouTube and, just whether it's marketing for music or just learning in general. And I think it's sped up so much in the last 4 or 5 years.
Hmm.
That's been a roller coaster of a rocket ship ride for you then.
Well,
Um,
what's really interesting is the technologies have changed so much. So when I was first doing it at Dubspot, we had video courses and we had projects that people would do, but there was no way for us to really talk to them. I remember I used to have an office hour every week where it was just like in a chat room and people could come. Like, you can imagine that's not very engaging or
right.
popular. But as the years have gone by, more technologies have been invented. The biggest thing for us was the introduction of Zoom,
Yep.
because then you can actually talk to people. And also Zoom enables you to share
Share your
the
screen.
audio from your computer. So then that was a huge leap forward. So then you're able to meet your mentor and you can share the music with them and they can hear what you're doing and give you advice and whatnot. And now we're using AI as the next wrinkle in that progression, I
Right.
would say.
Well, and I think from an education standpoint, I mean, if you rewind back 20, 25 years ago, you'd go to class at the school, and you'd have whatever the professor had prepared for the day to teach you, and then give you an assignment. And I think what's really exciting now is a lot of the courses are online, and it evolved into that where I can Google just about anything and probably pull up some YouTube video of somebody teaching it. But the thing I think is a challenge is the real experts probably aren't taking it's hard to get true experts that are doing their craft to be the ones teaching. You've got lots of kind of those average performers that can teach a whole lot of things and do a really good job of it. But I think there's a gap, I still think there. I think AI is probably something that's going to be able to help bridge that gap,
I
and
mean,
probably
I
do a custom teaching, like here's what you should do based on what you need, rather than just show up to class like 25 years ago and hope the professor was going to touch that one topic you're really actually interested in, and you get 2 days of interesting stuff, and the rest of it was just nice to know, right?
yeah, that's really crucial. The law school I was working at, and many schools, you're taking like a whole program, a one size fits all program, and somebody has decided you need to take these 24 courses to go from beginning to end. And I remember I heard it said that in any given classroom situation, about half of the people are behind where you are and don't quite understand everything you're saying, and then the other half don't, they're already past what you're saying and don't really need it anymore. And then there's a few people in the middle where that's exactly what they needed to know that day.
Yep.
So our ambition for future proof is to offer people what they need and not make them study things they don't need, and enable them to reach their goals faster and more efficiently and learn the
Yeah.
things they need to get where they're going quicker, basically.
Well, and my guess, you talked about the game changing thing that happened with the Zoom, when you could share screens or audio, when you're trying to teach somebody. And I think what's been so crazy to see over the last year is how you can take the screenshots and share those into whatever open AI, whatever the AI tool is, and then have that analyze it and figure out what your problem is, what your need is. And 95% of the time it's probably pretty spot on what how to do that fix. And I think it'll be really interesting to see if there ever gets to the point where, especially for musicians, whether you're in Ableton, Pro Tools, whatever you're choosing to work in for your software, Dorico, if it could potentially watch what you're doing, and then if you asked a question, how do I do this, and then just have the teaching thing somehow be right integrated in the moment when you need it, that would be
So
amazing.
it's funny you say that, because that's exactly what we've built and we're launching it next week. So we've made an AI we call Cadence with a K, and initially it was a chat bot that you could type and answer questions about the courses, but we've built it into an app now that talks to you by voice, and you run it on your computer and it works together with Ableton Live. And it's pretty much exactly what you said. As you do things in Ableton, it can see everything you're doing, both from reading the data out of Ableton and also by looking at your screen at the same time. It does both.
Wow.
And so it sees what you're doing. And if you run into something you don't know, you're like, Cadence, I'm trying to make the kick drum cut through the other bass frequencies, but it sounds all muddy. Like, how could I address that? And it can literally say, oh, I see that you have the bass line on track 2 and the kick drum on track 1, and have you should use sidechain compression there. And you're like, what is sidechain compression? I never heard of it before. And it says, well, you need to put the compressor on the kick drum or on the bass track, and then you need to trigger it from the kick track. So every time the kick hits, it's going to duck the bass track so it'll come through. And you can ask, is that what people do? Is that the standard way? And it can tell you, yeah, that's the standard procedure that everybody uses. It can go into as much detail as you want. It has a memory of what you've done before. It also integrates with our courses. So if you're doing a project in our school, it already knows that you're on that page and what the project is and what kind of help you might need. It's like, all right, our goal is to have it be as if there was somebody, a knowledgeable expert sitting next to you watching your work, and you can just ask him whatever you need. I think the voice part is really important, especially for music, because um music is hard to describe in words. It's not like answering questions about math or English. So I've always found if I'm trying, I can talk to ChatGPT about what I'm doing in my Ableton project, or I could even upload a screenshot, but it's very difficult to describe everything you're doing. And you become impatient very quickly typing away. Like, I don't want to be typing paragraphs of text while I'm trying to make
Mhm.
music. It takes me out of the flow, you know? But if you can just really quick ask, like, oh, why doesn't that work? Or how can I make that louder or whatever? And then it immediately sees and can just tell you, it's much more fluid.
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, the AI tool or use that you're doing, it doesn't sound like you're having it try and write music for you. And I mean, because I know that's a big controversial topic. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too far, but I think oftentimes people are like, oh, AI is just generating music for you. It sounds like you're using it to help improve the flow. It's not just like creating for you. So it's keeping that creativity with the artist. I mean, that's probably that for a lot of people. I think that's why we do music, is we enjoy doing it. And when if it just is done for us, then where's the joy in that
Yeah, I
experience?
mean, I don't want to get too
I
far
I, I
into that
know.
either, but I will say, like, these platforms that generate music by AI have millions of users, and they are what they are. I'm not going to get into that, but the people that are our students that are really passionate about making music and that's their main focus. They're spending all their time on that. They aren't really interested in doing that. I actually had a workshop about that at one point, and nobody would come to that workshop, like, because it's just not that interesting. And if you're a musician, like you said, I love playing music. I love playing music with other people.
Yeah.
That's why I started playing music. And for me to sit and type into an interface to make things, it's just not fun for me. It gives me a headache, actually. After a while. And so I tried experimenting with those things a year or two ago, and I know they've improved, but it just doesn't interest me that much, to be honest. And what I have found our students are very interested in is using AI to help them with all the other things that musicians have to do. These days, you have to be your own manager and agent and promoter and marketer and everything else. And AI is great for that.
Yep.
I'm working on a course right now for marketing where the AI can help lead you through the questions you need to answer to develop, like who is your audience, for example? What kind of music are you making? Well, what kind of people would probably like that? Well, where are they? Where do they hang out online? Well, how could I reach those people? Things like that. Or I'm also teaching a workshop right now, vibe coding for music producers,
Mhm.
which has been really popular. And I've been teaching the students how to make their own plugins. In fact, while we were talking, I see one of my students just made a new app that he can load MIDI files into, and it detects the chords and harmonic structure, and it tells him if he has any out of key notes, or it suggests different chords that he could use. It looks really cool.
That would be very cool.
I
Yeah.
started making my own audio plugins. We just made on Tuesday night, we had a workshop where the group made it. We made one called the Reverbatron. So I think there's huge potential for AI to help musicians, but it may not be primarily in making the music.
Well, I think that's fantastic, 'cause I think, when people talk about music and AI, the focus is on all these, I can just go make this song and it kicks out like 5 different versions of some song it made up that sounds like somebody else. And, at least the time I've spent playing around in those, it has some good ideas, but you know, there's, I don't know, there's something to that real soul that comes and like that piece of you that you leave inside that song um, when it's a live player. It's really tough. It's hard to create it with virtual instruments, let alone have the AI do it perfectly.
No, that is so true. And even, I mean, in some ways, AI hasn't changed things that much because there's already so many sample loops and construction kits and so many other things. And my students at Icon Collective were using all those things, but I would always tell everybody, if you can play an instrument or sing or do anything, you definitely should do that in your music, because that is how you will sound different than everybody
Yeah.
else. And my guess with the AI music generators is that it'll be easier and easier to make kind of mid music,
Right.
but making something really creative will be harder, whether you're using AI or not. I mean, it's always it's always been hard,
Right.
but but that's kind of how I see it.
Well, I was just 'cause I try to learn all the time as well. Just the other night, I was watching a um, course from John Powell where he was talking about how to train your dragon, and he was just diving into how they did some of the music for that when he was doing the show, and he they'll program stuff with virtual instruments, and it sounds amazing, and for most people they're like, oh, that's so good. And then he went in and he said, got to go to Abbey Road and some of these other studios, and I had the recorder player play this thing, or I had these different instruments. He's like, you just listen to he'd play the difference, and the one sounds really good, that's the virtual instrument that they did, and then he plays the other, and it's just, man, you can just tell. And he talked about how when you're doing music, especially for the big screen, there's just something it's just better and different when you have real players that are masters at their instrument, right?
Even if you're not a master of your instrument, if you're an okay guitar player, but you still have your own style and your own vibe,
Yeah.
even the mistakes you make, like it's all part of, communicating
Yeah.
who you are as an artist. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's really crucial. So I don't see that that's going to go away.
Well, and I know uh, eh, the long term kind of plans for the music. I know you've got a lot of courses in this tool, and I think the AI piece of it is very, very interesting, where it's coaching. It sounds like with the Ableton integration, that's huge when you're learning in a beginner. Do you envision this kind of expanding into? You talked about marketing and some of these other problems that a lot of musicians have that they struggle with. The AI can do well. Do you envision integrating some of that coaching into this tool you have as well? Then,
Yeah, definitely. So we're building courses. We're still building our curriculum. We have a lot of the production curriculum done, but I want to expand it into marketing and business, and also um, coding, AI assisted coding. I think there's going to be a lot of scope for people to make their own tools to help them do whatever they're doing. Um, the basic concept of our the basic concept of the AI that we're using is, we have this pool of courses. How do you know what you should study or where you should start? That's
yeah,
the biggest question that people have when they're starting. So in our system, you tell our AI what your level of skill and experience is and what your interests are, and then it will assemble a custom curriculum for you based on that. And then while you're going through those courses, then the AI can help you. We still have videos and we still have written material and we still have projects that you do, but we have the AI embedded on every page. So, like, it's very common you watch a video about mixing and then you can see the person is great at mixing, but you still have questions and they're not there to ask. Like you
mm,
might think, what did he mean by I should always EQ the bass that way? I don't quite get that. So then you can just call our AI and ask it, and it can explain to you all the things that weren't in the video, or reading between the lines, or taking it further or applying it to your own interests. So you might say, oh, that was a great mixing video, but I make dubstep. Like, how does that affect me? He was talking about something else. And it can immediately just tell you, oh, this is how it would apply to you. And it already knows what you're doing from your past experience. So the more you work with our AI, the more targeted advice it gives you.
very cool. Well, that sounds amazing. I think the tailored learning is definitely the next evolution that's gonna happen. I think one of the challenges with the online learning, it's hard for kids to learn how to learn, and kind of have
Mhm.
that learn to love learning, and now if I can ask and get right to the things that are interesting, and then have it suggest the next thing, I really think that probably is one of that's going to be the future of learning in a lot of ways. I
I
think
mean,
it's
we're in this era of information overload. There's loads of information about everything available on YouTube and on the internet. And the problem people have now is, here's 20 people explaining mixing to me, but which one is right and which one applies the most to what I'm doing? Do I have to watch all of these? What if this guy disagrees with him? How do I figure out, which is right? And that's where the AI can really help you.
yeah.
I think that's where AI is going to help society in a lot of ways, is helping us sort through the huge amounts of information that are just we're drowning in.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Well, I know we're running out of time here. I've got one of the questions I ask a lot of the guests is if you could go back and give yourself, your 20-year-old self advice about music and career and just kind of that advice, if you could talk to your younger self and,
Oh
what would
wow.
you tell yourself?
Well, I guess one thing I didn't expect back then is music changes and the music business changes and the music industry changes. So if you want to have a successful career for any length of time, you need to be able to evolve with it and change and find what your role is going to be in this new situation. You can't assume that I'm going to play bass in jazz clubs for the next 40 years and that's going to be my career. The things just change so fast. The opportunities that existed for me when I was 22 are totally different now. So
So evolve. And have you got any like piece of best advice somebody's ever given you over the years that comes to mind?
the best advice I could give is if you're going to be playing music for your career, you have to be doing something that you really love. Because if you don't, it's very practical actually. If you don't love it, you won't do it long enough to become successful and you'll just give up because you'll get bored and hate it. You really have to have that passion to keep you doing it and continuing to improve and continuing to move forward with your career. And that may take you in different directions and into different kinds of music, but I really strongly believe you have to follow your passion in order to be successful. And it's not I'm not saying it as some pie in the sky thing. It's very simple. It's very practical. And I had that experience before myself. When I started playing jazz, I did it because I absolutely loved it. And then I started branching into other kinds of music because I needed to make more income. And eventually I was making really good money as a studio touring musician, but playing a lot of music that I was kind of indifferent to. And ultimately I got so bored of it that that's why I became a DJ actually, because after 6 years of playing pop music and just pl- playing not very interesting pop music, I I had to move on and do something else. I was like, this is great. I'm at the peak of my career, but I'm bored out of my skull and I can't. Touring, especially, is really hard if you're not really interested in what you're doing
Yeah.
because it's very inconvenient to fly everywhere, even if it's under the best possible circumstances. I found when people are doing something they don't really want to be doing, they just complain all the time. You know what I mean? And if everybody loves what they're doing, then everybody's great and it's fun to be around everybody and you have a great time.
Absolutely. Well, and I've heard quotes. I don't know who said it, but a lot of people, men die at 75, 80 years old is what we aspire to live to, right? But there was a quote, and I'll have to look up who it was, but that most men die at age 25, because it's one of those where if you think about it when you're young and you have all these like desires and dreams and you think you're going to do these things, and then a lot of times the idea that you can actually do something you love gets sucked out of you sometime in that 20 to 30-year-old self. And I think what's really cool is, I mean, you've been in this industry for several decades now, and AI could scare most people away, and you've just taken all of this wealth of knowledge that you've gained, incredible amounts of knowledge with recording and touring and music in general and educating people, and you're able to take this and use that AI for what I feel like is a really awesome purpose to help further and help more people. So I commend you for that. So
My career I've almost been dragged forward by my own interests because my career has basically been like this. I start doing something, I get better at it, I have gotten somewhat established doing it, and then I develop another interest. And then that interest, at first, it's just like a little side interest, and then gradually it expands and fills more and more of my time. And then at some point, I think I'm really going to have to make money off of this new thing because it's totally taken over my life, and I'm not really interested in the old thing anymore. And then I kick off a whole new arc. And I guess the AI has been the latest since a few years ago, since it really became available with the ChatGPT moment.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be fun to see where it goes, and I'm excited to see what your school does. For those that want to check it out, definitely go check this out. You can actually, I was playing on it earlier, futureproofmusicschool.com, and there's this AI music coach you can click on there, and you literally can click the call button, and you start talking to this AI cadence agent.
Yep, she's
And
ready to talk to you. I've talked to her for hundreds of hours.
it was quite good when I was doing. I always try to stump it, like, okay, it won't know this, but it did a pretty good job. So, and I have no doubt that it's going to continue to get better. It's just at a exponential rate that all these seem to be improving now. So,
well, we have two AIs at our company. We have Cadence is the AI music coach, which I believe is the most advanced product of its kind. I don't know any other schools that have anything like that. And then we also have a back-end AI that advises and helps us run the business named Nova. And it's tapped into all of our marketing data and all of our student success data. And we get reports from it every day that, oh, this student hasn't logged in for a couple of weeks. You better check on them. Or every time one of our teachers meets with a student, they receive a custom report on the student's progress. It'll say, this student's been working on mixing. They seemed like they were having trouble with this. Maybe you should ask them how they're doing with that. So
that's awesome. No, I definitely go check that out. We'll put links down in the show notes, John, but thank you so much for what you're doing for the industry. Thank you for taking all of this educational knowledge that you have as well and bringing it to other people. So look forward to seeing where this thing goes.
Well, thanks, Jason. Thanks for having me on. It's fun talking.
Thanks so much. Hey, it's Jason here, and I hope you've gotten a lot of value out of this episode. Be sure to check out our show notes to learn more about our guest today, and if you'd like to support our podcast, there's a few things that you can do to help us grow. First, if you hit subscribe, it will help ensure that you don't miss a future episode. Second, if you'll share it with your friends on social media or send it via email or message, it helps us spread the word as well. And third, if you'll leave an honest review, it really helps with the algorithms so that other people can find our podcast. Finding success and fulfillment in the music industry is possible, and I look forward to seeing you on our next episode.